Okay, so welcome to Monday in Hanoi, and well, actually Sunday in California. Okay, and that we're coming to you live from Southern California. Live in an area east of downtown Los Angeles, so there's a 14-hour time difference. At least now there's a 14-hour time difference. I don't believe Vietnam does daylight savings time, so we do in California, and so on November 2nd. Daylight savings time kicks in, and basically it changes our clock by an hour. The old axiom is spring forward, fall back. And so the whole world gets on, and everybody messes up, and some systems have that built in and don't. And I've had buildings not open for an hour because the clocks change and whatnot. So, and one year we had classes mess up because I wasn't there for an hour because of the fall back type of thing. Whoops, sorry about that. Anyway, because everybody's there normal time and I was an hour late. So confusion. But anyway, so we are Monday. Hopefully it'll be a lively Monday. Get you started off for the week. I'm Mitch Cochran, and go through a whole bunch of slides and whatnot. But this is a class on visualization, data analytics, analysis. Not so much the techniques, more kind of philosophies. We're going to do a bunch of AI. There will be some AI projects in there, SQL, some Excel. So a nice variety of things that we're going to do, and a lot of this will build. And if those are taking the data mining class that we have later in the week, I know a lot of times people take both at the same time. They will kind of dovetail to each other. So there will be a lot of information, and that class focuses a lot on techniques. So welcome, and I really enjoy teaching these classes. I think you guys do very well, and I always have a lot of respect for anybody that is taking classes, and especially in a language that is different than their native. So to come in with a second language to learn it. And they always say that when you're reading books and you're doing things, it's always good to read that in the native language for content. But when you're teaching, when you're learning concepts and you're trying to get that with the language, that can be a lot. Okay. And so you definitely have my respect to be in the English only program. The program is really well. The students do very well in this course and in the data mining course. Your projects and things are very well received. They're very well created. They're well spoken. So I'm always impressed with what you've done. So right now we've got 32 in. So sorry that we're not in the learning management system. We set this up last week, and so we just need to add that in. Everybody has been added to the Microsoft OneDrive. Now, normally, all the files will be in the Google, or what's the open source is called Moodle. The university has customized that for your learning management system. And all the material will be up there, all the classes, all the lectures, whatnot. Now, the Moodle of these, they have a size limit on files and sometimes the total file space. So on the OneDrive, the shared drive, I put up the recordings will all go up there. So all the classes will be recorded. And you can then pick up those if you miss, such as life. We have 50 people in the class, so there are 55. So they're going to be a lot of people talking and whatnot over time. And if there are just things happen, no problem. Life happens. Life gets in the way of trying to do the best things that we can. So the information is up there. The syllabus is up there. And we'll go through the syllabus. It has some of the information on the slides. That we'll go through, so take a look at that. But hopefully, the learning management system, I'll get my enrolled in it. It's just they haven't assigned the class to me in the system. So for that, and also in the same way, we'll get the syllabus and the first lecture up for the data mining class for those. So let's go ahead and kick in. This is an interactive class. Typically, it tends to be very quiet, and I know even bigger classes, and honestly, online classes tend to be less interaction. People don't want to necessarily get out there and get in front, and understood, not a problem. But please, where you can, raise your hand or chirp in. If you want, put the comments in chat. I look at chat a lot. So especially as we do student presentations, because we will be having 100 student presentations, literally. And so if you have comments and things, because this is about you learning, I've laid out a general thing that I'll kind of coordinate and mediate and whatnot, but a lot of the learning is on you, and a lot of that is are the topics. And so we've got kind of a broad stroke of things that we want to do. But if there are things that are interest to you that we want to highlight, please let me know and we'll see what we can do to make that in, because I want to make sure the classes is about you guys. When we do exercises and things where you can bring in your own experience and make it more fun, then even better, because from a learning experience, if something is more enjoyable, you learn more. Okay, and so we kind of play with that. All right, so where are we? So live workshop Monday mornings, 7 to 9:30. Yeah, we may not go all the way to 9:30 because I always want to make sure that you have enough time to get to your next class. And being a professor that sometimes is in the second class, it's always hard because I've had a couple classes get delayed by half an hour because the prior class has been late, type of thing. Now, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to be respectful of jobs and things that you guys have in your lives, and also of the next class. So typically the weekend prior to class, so hopefully Thursday or Friday, the notes will be up so you can take a look through those. And in this case, there won't be a pre-recorded, so that's a slide from another class. We won't have a pre-recorded lecture on this particular course. But still, read through the slide deck because I have been told that we go pretty quickly. And yes, when we have 2 hours and 100-something slides a night, yes, it does go pretty fast. So please, if there are terms, if there are things, please put it in chat. Let's talk. But yeah, if you can go over the slides beforehand, make it even better. Okay. You're going to see that I'm a fan of TED Talks. TED is a group organization for those that have not experienced it yet. It's not as broad. There was a huge thing of it for a while back, but it's still very popular. Basically, it's people giving 5, 10, 15-minute discussions very focused on a certain topic. And they will do whole conferences around a number of speakers on all of these different topics. And so it's very current, although some of the things that I look at are a couple years old. But what's interesting is that those are the ones that actually stand the test of time. And that's one of the most important things, is how do those things that people talk about, is it, their thoughts, their guesses, but how do they actually work? Well, they work, the test of time will tell them. If it is something that will last and be true, the test of time will show it out. Okay. And so you'll be seeing that typically those won't be tested. And so you could just enjoy those. They're all short. You can literally be doing something else while you're listening to them. And they're just interesting for key points and things like that. If I do to go after one, you will be noted. It will be written someplace that, yes, you will get tested on certain TED Talks, but you will know exactly which ones. All right, so why am I here? Why am I the background? Well, I've done lots of 40 years of IT. So 20 years with one city, a small city in Monrovia, 5 years with a very large city. I was one of the directors, so I was running the city along with the city manager, the board of directors. IS manager is, underneath directors. But with a smaller city, but we did police, fire, a little bit of everything. And the neat thing about cities is that they, unlike a bus company that just does buses. Yes, you have HR and you have facilities, but your focus is on the bus. Well, cities, they're like 7 or 8 different companies in once, because you have police, you have fire, you have public works, you have HR, you have community services for the parties and the various facilities and rentals and all those various things you do. So it's really interesting, the wide variety of things, and also the legal world of things in the public sector. And when I say public sector, I mean government versus private sector, being profit and industry. And then I worked for IBM as a systems engineer, which basically is a technical sales rep in effect. And we go in and we do pre-sale, post-sale support. And then prior to that, it was a product manager, which basically is one that goes out and makes sure that we have the product, and we do all technical support. And I supported a couple product lines for half of the U.S. For things. In the military, part of the California State Guard, which is part of the National Guard. We have in the U.S. the Army Reserve, are the federal, and then each of the 50 states have a National Guard. The National Guard function is a little bit different because we're able to be both police powers and Army powers. If we get federalized, we become part of the Army. Otherwise, we belong to the governor. So normally it's emergency management are the things that we do. And so I do a lot of simulators. I do a lot of instruction on running and teaching, blowing people up in simulators and teaching 19-year-olds how to shoot and make sure they don't hurt themselves or anybody else that they don't mean to. XO means that executive officer, so I'm second in charge of a large infantry attachment, whatnot. CSM, CGIOs for some certifications. But the critical part, the most important thing of this slide is use mcochran.it@gmail.com. Okay, that is the one that is on my phone and on my, I think 6 different emails that I have to check. And so if you want to make sure that you get me, use the mcochran.it. Generally don't send messages through Moodle or whatnot. I don't check on those often enough, so please. If there are issues and when we talk about things being due and life gets in the way, not a problem. Make sure that you contact me through that. I'm happy to do Zoom sessions. I generally get on 15, 20 minutes early for the classes. You can do it before, we can do it after class, depending on what your schedule is, and we can schedule time. So please, I'm available. With a 14-hour time difference, let's make it work for us so that we can get it and we can make it into your schedule as well, because I want to be, again, respectful of your time. So what are we trying to do in this silly class of ours? Introduction of analytical decision making. So really, what is it? What are we trying to do? What does data really do for us? What is the background? What are those things? What are some of the tools? What makes it more believable? You have this great idea. How do we make it trustworthy? There are some very famous management gurus, Drucker, who had basically said, and his quote was the idea that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And that's very true, because how do you know if something's getting better? The one I always love is the idea of customer service. Well, we provide better customer service. Okay, what does that mean? What is a number? What is something that we can do to actually show that we do better customer service? Because everything we do, especially in business, there is a cost. Everything is a cost. Okay, and whether it's a known cost and you're actually writing a check and using a debit card or Zelle or giving somebody cash, whatever it is, or is it an implied cost and type of thing, and like marketing, advertising, things like that. But everything will have a cost. So what is that benefit that we want to do? So from a business point of view, any organization, we're there to use resources efficiently. And I put it that way because that's government. We want to use that. We want to make sure that it's auditable. We want to make sure that we can see things from credit and whatnot. So to make sure there isn't corruption, because corruption's like a big tax. Because it doesn't, the money gets out of the system. You're not able to do the things that you're able to do, or they said you did them, but you really didn't because the correct money wasn't spent, whatever. So all those audits and whatnot, but at the end of the day, we need to get the biggest bang for our buck that we can to be the most effective. So the statistics, you guys have done this class in statistics, it's my understanding. And so we'll kind of go through that very quickly, but given that you may have taken that a year, I think some people say it was like a year ago they took it. So we'll kind of review that, because that becomes a lot of the basis. And these aren't the really crazy statistics. Some of the crazy ones, yes, those are in the data analytics class. But for the most part, these aren't. And we're going to be using tools like Excel. And Excel is not that formidable, but it will show us some of the things that we can do to actually do that and do a lot of things. And we're going to use R and Python and whatnot. So those are some of the things that we can do with these freebie tools. And the neat thing about all these are tools you can then take. And so in the US, over 90% of companies are small companies, and that's defined as less than, I think, 20 employees. And so you're going to be working in small organizations. And so there is no money for all this IT and information systems and technologies and tools and all these things. So to be able to get a lot of open source. And a lot of these tools, too, have been things that are just absolutely incredible. There are a lot of tools out there that are freebie, that are open source, that literally you would pay $10,000 to use. And it's somebody's been their baby, their brainchild, their thing that their passion and hobby. And they create this tool and It just works really well. And so we have a number of that in cybersecurity because I teach for Cal State San Bernardino. And this semester, I'm teaching four classes: a policy, cybersecurity, systems analysis, a number of things there. And so all of these different things kind of work towards that. So we'll explore data. So what is data telling us? Because we're telling a story. We're going to be looking at this from you have everything we do is you're getting information to get to a conclusion. Okay. And whether it's they're making a conclusion, you're just doing facts, it's something that you're suggesting, great. All of those things are terrific. Okay. But we need to be able to explore that and be able to present that and give the best story we can, the most cogent story that we can. Now, AI, what is the AI impact on this? How are they doing? And one of the ChatGPT exercises that we're going to do is you're going to go and do some exercises on where ChatGPT is wrong. There are things that there are terms out there where ChatGPT will make up information. There are things that, and how do we address that? And the one I love that always scares me is AI will have two different alternatives, and then they will make a determination on which one you are more likely to believe, and they will give you that one. It's kind of, that's scary. It's kind of, no, I want to make that determination. I don't want a system to tell me. I want the system to tell me the facts. I think people are better at making determinations, and we need that. And part of that is as we tell the story, as we do these various parts of a decision-making process, you need to understand it. What's kind of weird in that government, they have the final draft of any report is all you have to keep. But for me, I always want to know the drafts and how did we get to that final conclusion? Not just some report that says this is important, this is important, this is why we're doing it. There are a lot more inputs. You know, when people put something together, it's negotiations. Okay, what are the different negotiation points? Because understanding how something got there is important because as things go, the political environment, the physical environment, something will change. And so a lot of those expectations or conclusions that were drawn may be on faulty foundational data type of thing. We're going to use tools of Excel. We'll do a little bit of SQL using Access. And so instead of running and building SQL databases, we're going to use the Microsoft Database Access. And in there, we can do SQL exercises. So you're going to do that to get kind of just familiar with SQL. And that's important because as you get data analytics, as we do Power BI desktops and things like that, sometimes you will have to pull information out of other systems. So you're going to need SQL, at least in understanding. It stands for Simple Query Language, and it's basically written in English as saying, okay, how do I get information? So it's very user-friendly as opposed to some computer languages, so they're being like Unix or whatnot. They're a little bit more cryptic. Power BI, Business Intelligence, Microsoft tool. Typically Tableau and some of the others are better desktop features, but from a class and for something that we can manage, we'll be introducing the concept using Power BI. We'll do a project in Google Analytics. So let Google tell you what's happening on the websites and things like that. So some definitely changes. If there are things that you want to see covered, if there are things that are additional, please pop it in chat, let me know, things like that. And the content will change slightly due to class tests and timing and whatnot, and just better ideas and better things that we can do. The classes evolve. I never offer the same class twice. They always tend to evolve. So this is a general outview as we go at this point of things that we're doing. We're going to be having, in the next slide or so, I'll tell you what the actual exercises are and the discussion questions, just normal Blackboard / in the learning system, adding comments. So they're doing, and I do discussion questions a little bit differently than most people do. You'll find that I do a lot of things differently than most, and that's important. Being able to understand and adjust to what your current situation is important. Everybody has thing. And it's kind of one of those where I looked at that from a job perspective. Is it you always pick from every job, it's training you for your next one. And you always want to learn and think about what you liked and what you didn't like. And that's okay because you'll get into whole new systems. Your lives will take you places you never thought. Because I refer to it as the right-hand turn. You're going in a path and all of a sudden something happens and we're going 90 degrees to the right for something completely different. So exploratory data mining, data cleaning, access, database reporting, dashboards, economic indicators, which a lot of you have covered in other classes, but I want to kind of look at it from our perspective in this light or this point of view. That we're doing machine learning. We'll do a heavy machine learning in the data mining class, and then generative AI, chat GPT. Again, we're going to be adding a team AI presentation in weeks 14, 15. And I'm not sure with so many people, we may do teams of three. Normally, I like teams of two. And honestly, that's from an academic point of view, because two people work together, three people, usually two people do the work, one person really doesn't. I found as an instructor. So that's why I like teams of two. But with so many people in class, we may do teams of three. We'll be discussing in a few weeks what the project will be when we get a little bit more into it. And then you guys will be doing a team project, and you'll actually be presenting that at the end as part of it. The very end, week 15, all assignments are due by the end of week 15. So here we are, your Monday morning, week 15, you have till Friday because I need to be able to turn in grades and make sure everything's graded and whatnot. Okay, so what is expected? This is the scariest slide of the entire year because this is the one that says, what did you just get signed up for? So what will it be expected of you? Individual Blackboard discussion questions this is totals up to 100, so 10 points. So just literally 2 to 3 questions every week. So just get used to signing in and doing questions. Data analytics, the real world example and advanced techniques. Okay. Those are 2 presentations, and these are ones that everybody is going to be doing, a individual memo and a individual presentation. Okay. And so you're going to do the first one before the midterm, and then you do the second one after the midterm. So we're going to have 100 of these presentations. Okay. And it's important because this is the one that you get to formulate, and your opinion matters. Okay. What's going to happen, that the overall view of that is that you do a memo, and basically think of it as your boss asks you, hey, I like that thing over there. It's a shiny thing. Tell me about the shiny thing. And you're going to basically do the equivalent of it and say, okay, what you like, what you don't like. And then we're going to discuss it in class. No PowerPoint. You're just going to present it. I prefer you talk kind of like your boss asks you in a meeting, as opposed to reading something from a script. And I know your English may not be the greatest and you want to do a little bit, that's fine. But I really want it to be a discussion. And then I'm going to ask questions, not to challenge you, so to speak, for a grade or whatnot, but just to get you to think, because I'm not expecting you to know everything about that topic. So what that project is you find whatever topic you want to do. You're going to find a data analytics on a real world example, anything from any source you want. I want you to find 2 additional sources, so that way you can so whenever you have a topic, what happens if that topic was wrong? Well, I want you to be intelligent. So I want you to get 2 more to be able to get some rounding out of that topic, to be able to figure out what else is good and bad, whatnot, so that you can give your analysis. Then you're just going to do a 2 to 3 page memo, and the memo is going to say everything we do in this class is memos. And the memo is just going to say, first page is basically, okay, what it was the article about. The second is, why do we care? Why are you as a data analyst care? What's important? What was right? What was wrong? That's your analysis. And your analysis won't be wrong. May not be as complete as I'd like, and we'll talk about that. But when you submit it, so if you turn in the memo, if you have the 2 references and you present it in class, you'll get full credit. Okay. And so we can have great discussions on those types of things. And that's important. A lot of the material that we're going to have in this class, you can read from the slides. There are a lot of things that I'll present and whatnot. That there are some things that you need a discussion on, but a lot of things are just more straightforward. That's why we leave a lot of time for the data analytics and these individual discussions, because how you apply, that is the most critical part that we have. We're going to have a whole bunch of exercises. We'll have a midterm, and the midterm will be more scenario based. Data analytics. So that one I want you to, before the midterm, we're going to talk about all these different examples of how data analytics really works. What works in the real world? How is it demonstrated? Those types of things. Then the second half is I want to do advanced techniques. What would be something that, as we've gone through the class, because midterm's basically week 8, kind of just after the middle, you're then going to be able to do and say, okay, you'll have enough knowledge that, hey, what would be advanced techniques? So let's all get smarter on some of the things that are out there, and whether it's a specific thing in AI, whether it's specific in other things, great. It's whatever you can do. And again, these topics can come from anywhere. They can come from TikToks, they can come from blogs, they can come from journals, they can come from your other classes. Anything that you want to do, you just have to find two additional reference. How do you find a reference? You Google it. Google is your friend. Now, and in classes, they will always say that Google is not peer reviewed. So how do you know Google is right? In theory, peer reviewed means that a number of smart people in the area have reviewed it. Well, Google in this case is great because it gets you in a direction. And we'll be able to have enough of information to get you smart about some of these things. We'll do a Team AI project, and again, that'll get flushed out in a couple of weeks, so no hurry there. And then we'll have the final exam we'll do. All the assignments are going to be in business memo form. So some universities have APT and all these other academic standards. Well, when you're out there in the real world, no, you have to write a business memo. And business memo just means everything is to or from a date and a subject. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about it in a moment, and it's going to have bluff. Okay. A big look up front. Okay. Yes, it does sound like a lie. Yes, you're going to bluff somebody. No, it's a positive thing. And that what we want to do is we want to basically think about it when anybody says write something in English, you need a topic sentence. And that was always hard. Okay, what is my topic sentence to get somebody interested to write this? Well, that's really what big look up front is. It's kind of a topic paragraph. Give me the answer. Think about how when you're writing a book, okay, if you write a novel, you don't want to tell, especially a mystery novel or a crime drama, you don't want to tell what the ending is until the very end. So, the 100, 200 page novel, and you don't give away the answer until the last 4 pages. And because you want to keep the people in there and interested in reading. In this case, we are something that, no, I want my boss to know what the answer is, and then he follows my logic. So the big look up front is give them the answer up front, and then we support the answer. So that's kind of what we're looking to do. So the individual presentations, 2 presentations, one before the midterm, one after. So these are those individual. So again, everybody has to do them. Okay. And I just break them up to do before and after, just so we space things out. And with so many people, we can do it. Now, when are they due? Well, before the midterm and after. So that's kind of wide open. In other words, you choose. So every morning, I'm going to ask and say, who wants to give a presentation? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you put your name in the chat window. And then when we start class, and I'll just go down the chat window in that order of whoever wants to sign up, and we'll do those presentations that day. And if we run out of time, then we'll just push some of those people to the next day. Okay. And so this is simple. Now, just don't put it off, because we really don't want to do 50 on week 7 or before the midterm type of thing. But so you definitely need to kind of space it out. These are ones that are only going to be 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, there isn't enough information there from a short article to go into lots of PowerPoints and things. No PowerPoint. It's a memo. It's a discussion. It's kind of like your boss asks you in a meeting, what do you think? Okay, and that's really what we're kind of simulating. Okay, and so I want you to think about these things, and that's why some of the discussion questions will be there. And I may ask some, I may not. Okay, depending on how you've covered it and what the topic is, because some topics lead to more discussion, some topics don't. Okay, so any topic, any data-driven making, any source. So for those in finance, those in marketing, those in some of the other fields, great, bring those in. Okay, and so let's see how we do. So it's a 2 or so page write-up. Okay, so it's memo. When I refer to a memo, it's single spaced. In the business world, the only one that is not single-spaced is typically legal. And legal is because they actually have that funny paper with the line numbers on the side, because they want to refer to specific line spaces. Everybody else in business is single-spaced. We don't do double-spaced because that's a waste of paper. In business, you also do double-sided. But in our case, single or double, that doesn't matter. But everything is single-spaced. Okay, so you need to find 2 additional sources. If you read one and you give me back that information, you're a parrot. Okay, you just read it just like a parrot would, give me back exactly. That's why I want you to be smart. I want you to get 2 additional sources and be able to give me the interpretation. So yes, you do the review of what is it about, great. Okay, and then you do your analysis. All right. And just 2 to 3 minutes of what you're presenting. Some people present a little bit longer. You don't share the screen. It is only discussion, and it is that way on purpose. It's not meant to be visual TikTok and visual things like that. This is back to normal, fast discussion only, because even though everybody gets excited about video and a picture is worth 1,000 words, that old saying, and whatnot, but in meetings and whatnot, that's why lectures are voice. Okay, that is the most efficient way to get information across. Is that so? In a conference and whatnot, they typically don't. And years ago, yes, they thought PowerPoint was required for every meeting. No, we don't. Okay, and we'll talk about what is PowerPoint, what are good aspects of PowerPoint, what are bad aspects about PowerPoint. Okay. So the student exercise is you're going to do two write-ups in the intro to data mining. Basically, that's two different Excel exercises that you have. Those are going to be basically more like a cookbook. So don't worry about going through the actual data mining techniques that they're going to be putting there. I'm going to have you kind of walk through them just to get familiar with them. So it's more cookbook that we have. So they'll give you step by step. We'll have SQL practice. We'll have a thing called report writing, which is a systems report where the system will kick out the report for you. And how do we make that look, and what is kind of the standard that we're doing? Power BI, which is a dashboard. Basically, you customize the equivalent of a website. You customize it. What information does somebody want up front every day? You have somebody that sells cars every day. They want to know what sold yesterday. So they have, it could be a speedometer. You can use analogies for things. Just could be a number. It could be a line graph. What are the things that would get across the information that's important? What's an hour to date, a minute to date? If you're doing web sales or something like that, what did in the last couple of minutes? What's in the last hour? What's in the last day, week, month? Whatever you want to do, that's fine. But this needs to be all designed around what is your goal. In this case, a lot of things we're going to do in Access, we're going to use the Northwind database. That's a fairly big not fairly big, it's a medium-sized database that Microsoft has for testing. And it's really great because it has enough build on there, enough weird things that we can do the exercises and run SQL and do some things in there. So it's a good tool that we have. We'll do a Google Analytics, and then we have a AI chat GPT exercise. Basically, that one is going to be go find things that are wrong. And you're going to find your area of expertise, put it in, and I want you to tell me what chat GPT said right. And also I want you to find things where chat GPT is wrong. Okay. And when we talk about AI, there's going to be a big discussion about truth, and that it's amazing. You could have 1,000 documents in AI, and if one is wrong, that whole thing can be polluted. The story I love is I did a analysis through ChatGPT for comparing two fighters in World War II, a German against a Japanese. They never saw each other. So how would the two compare? A German measurement 109 versus a Japanese 0. If they were ever to fight each other, what would they, what would be the results? And so ChatGPT came back and did the feeds and speeds, so all the technical differences between them. And then at the very end, it said the Japanese 0 was used heavily in the Battle of Britain. The Japanese 0 was never in England, in Europe. It was never against there. But occasionally, AI will have convolutions or convulsions. They will just make up things that they have. So we want to kind of look through that. And I think long term, I think there are going to be some databases out there that people will build and sell as a trusted source of truth. We have, in the systems world, we have what's called a trusted system. We know the code. We know nobody's hacked into it. We can test it. We can do all the things that we want. And I think there are going to be some trusted databases. And picture too, just as kind of a side, what do you believe? There's a lot of things of cognitive theory saying that you will accept things that make sense to you. Okay, well, that seems pretty obvious. But if things are odd, you may or may not accept them. Well, AI is kind of goofy. Okay, so how is it going to present some of those things? And is it going to tell you what you really need? There's a term called telling truth to power. That is basically tell your boss something that's bad news. A lot of people won't because they don't want to tell them bad news. Well, that's not truth to power. Well, AI doesn't want to tell truth to power, and so it's kind of a weird thing. So we're going to get into that AI is not always right and it's not always accurate. And so we'll be playing with some of those. So what can we do with AI to make that the most successful and make you, an incredible tool for you to use? All right, so when do things due? Typically, they're due on the Monday that they follow. Okay, so if I do if I were to give the Excel exercise, and it would be due next week, but then there's always a grace period of 2 weeks. Okay. After that, it gets shut off. Okay. So you guys all have lives. You all have boatloads of classes. I'm teaching 6. So yes, I'm as busy as anybody else. Um, and so there will always be so that and keep in mind, deadlines are really there just to make sure you progress. Picture if you had to do all this work in the last 2 weeks because you just put it off. Yeah, that's a bad thing. Okay. So this deadlines are just to keep us honest and to make sure that we're making progress. And that's really what it is in business. Your boss will pick a date, and then unless there's a financial or a accounting or some other reason, they just want to make sure that, from a philosophy point of view, everybody's moving ahead at the same rate. Okay. So if it's assigned on week 2, it'll be due week 3. There will be a 2-week grace period. So you could turn it in week 4 with no thing. You could turn it in week 5 with no problem. But after that, then it gets shut off. Okay. The learning management system will not accept it. If there are outside additional circumstances, then email me, talk to me in class, something like that, and we're good to go. Okay. I just want to keep people honest. All right. Now, grading criteria, when you're in elementary school, you're in high school, you're generally given cookbooks. They say, this is the pattern. This is exactly how you follow through the pattern. Okay. As we get into the adults, we become tools. Okay. In that you need to use these tools to be able to figure out what it is that you're going to do, because there may not be a cookbook for you. Okay. And so you need to be able to figure out the answer. Okay, there are no dumb questions, and the only dumb question, actually, there is one, those that you can answer yourself, because then why are you asking me? Look up the answer, do the research. If you don't know an answer, when you go to your boss, you say, well, I need clarification. Well, already give him some cases. He's hiring you to solve the problem. Okay, he doesn't want your problem. The last thing he wants is to work with his problems and your problems, and why would he hire you? Okay, so to have that person come in, so anytime you have a situation like that, give your boss the respect to say, okay, here are some alternatives, and one of those alternatives sometimes is do nothing, and we'll talk about that when we say bluff. Okay, so you're expected to figure out business solution and present it. Okay. Papers, we look at content, professional image, your original work. Keep in mind that ChatGPT and or copying from other people. Academics are your smarts, okay? And I already know what Google knows. I want to know what you know, okay? And so your original analysis. Now, when we do a document, you say by you. You're taking credit for everything in a document. So I don't care about a lot of it. I don't care about graphics. I don't care about any of those. Cite them. Get great, gorgeous graphics. Copy and paste. Just cite them. Okay, if you get excerpts from other people that were some really good analysis that are industry standards, great, cite them. Okay, and then build your additional comments on top of those sites. Okay, so make sure that you cite other people's work. Just don't copy it verbatim. Okay. Presentations, we want to look at it. Do you understand what you're presenting? And in this case, people who do the 5-minute, they just pick up an article and start reading it. It's kind of, no, you don't understand what you're presenting. Okay, but anytime we do any presentation, we want to make sure, does it cover the copy completely, and does it make sense to the audience? Okay, and so because have you thought of what questions are going to be asked? So do we cover the topic completely, so we can already figure out, make sure that everybody leaves knowing everything they should, but also does it make sense to the audience? You'll hear the term dumb it down. You'll hear the term 10,000 or 30,000 foot view, kind of like you're looking at a problem from an airplane. And sometimes we have to do that. And so if you need to be able to explain it simply. Okay, and that's when you really know that you understand the issue that you have. What's important in the issue, what's not. And what's important, how does it explain to your boss? Being able to take a technical issue and explain it to your boss why certain things don't work is an important aspect of your job. Okay. So no assigned text will be software open source except Excel and Access. I don't think the Open Office has some of the features, but if you want to try it, you're more than welcome to. Tests are all from the class slides, provide materials, the discussion questions. Typically, if I've asked a discussion question, I want you to get thinking about it. I want you to be able to answer it. Yeah, that's probably fair game for a test. Because if I thought it was important enough to get your thoughts on something and get you thinking about something, then it's probably fair game. All right, so let's talk about communications. What is a business memo? Okay, date to from subject. Okay, and able to use, I don't care, any format memo that you want to use. You can go look on the internet. You can go if you work for various companies, if the university, anything that you want to do, any format is fine. When you go to work for an organization, they will have a standard format, and you'll just have to adjust to their standard format. Such is life. Okay. So I don't care. I'm looking for the business memo because it's a style of writing that you get used to. The APA and some of the things that academics do, that's a style of writing that you get used to. So business, they want you to write something. That's why we want to do the bluff. We want to do the information up front. And that's what all of your reports and whatnot need to be written in. Okay. So no need for salutation, dear, to whom it may concern, none of that. We do the bottom line up front. What was the analysis of the data, the graphics to support your analysis, the type of memo. Sometimes we have different types of memos. We have an information memo, which is the analysis. We have an action memo, and they will have what are called courses of action, COAs. And basically, it's kind of a, hey, boss, what would you like to do? Here's some options. You tell me. Okay, lots of money, little money, no money, whichever option you'd like to do. Typically, there are at least three. One is usually a do nothing. So, hey, we'd like to change because we'd be able to do this and this, but if we still doing what we are, it may be the cheapest alternative, but we can't do extra things, or it may be the most costly because hey, the building is falling down and we need to do maintenance, and if we don't, then the building will completely fall down, type of thing. So there can be some real extremes in how we do it. And then you're also doing sometimes memos for file where you're just documenting a situation, or you're doing background techniques and issues that you have. So it's a military term, bottom line up front, designed to enforce speed, clarity in the reports and emails. Most important details first, don't tease, delay main point. Declares the purpose of the email, the action, should answer the who, what, where, when, and why. Okay, and comes out from 2019. All right. So there's a log for you if you'd like. Bluff, the first sentence of each paragraph, sum up all the information in the paragraph. Good bluff should cover all the info in a paragraph like an umbrella. So think of your paper, your memo. Your first paragraph is an executive overview. Your first paragraph is, okay, we analyzed the purchasing procedure and we found the following things that we'd like to update. Okay, and then you go into, okay, we looked at the old procedure, the new procedure, we compared other companies, we compared best of breed, all that bottom stuff can be there. But that first paragraph is because it tells what we're trying to do and what the answer already is. So some interesting thing, send an email for the subject line, make sure it's clear as possible. What's the email's purpose, what you want your recipient to do, take from military purposes, subject, keywords. The neat thing about some of the military style that they have is they tend to try and take emotion out. If you look at TikToks, if you look at all these things, if you look at the clickbait, that when they want you to click on all these things because they want you to see more ads, and they say, and I love listening to all the various videos and whatnot, they say, let me explain, and they're trying to kind of pull you in to some of those. But we wanted to make sure that there's less emotion there. You don't want to add adjectives and discussions that get people hyped up. Okay, it's more straightforward. Let the end user analyze the facts. Okay, and unless your goal is sales or marketing or something, then great, emotion. But that's part of the difference. So this particular person, structure emails, maximize efficient, or applied the lessons to the emails. So there they did actions with keywords. Not required if you're sending me emails, but it's an interesting topic. I will try and do those types of things in emails that I send out. Next time you email direct reports, info, status, request, vacation, basically, because a good thing about something like that is when somebody, you come in the morning, you have 40 emails, which ones do you have to answer first? So things like this really help when you're just flooded with things. So bottom line up front, declares the purpose of the email, the action should be quickly answered, the 5 W's. Air Force doctrine documents have been rescinded, replaced by doctrine volumes. So there is an example, just basically saying, okay, here's what we're talking about, that they changed the format of how they were studying all the class definitions that they have. So digest the announcement, decision, and new procedures. They don't have to know all the background, but the background's there. Okay. Let's see. So info work from home. Shannon, bottom line, reduce the number of days employees can work from home 3 to 1 day per week, effective December 1st. Background, effective to encourage team morale, foster team collaboration, and management. So they already know the info, quickly grasp the information in the email, the bottom line, big change in corporate policy, um, and show the decisions filed supported by management and whatnot. Also, short of emails, it's interesting when we look at papers, we look at things. People, your boss, if you write a 5-page report, he won't read past the first page. Okay, in a lot of it. So the bluff gives them enough info. And if they agree with your bluff, they agree with the things that you're saying, then they don't necessarily need. They know there's documentation. They know that you're supporting what you've written. Whether you support the issue or not, you support what you've written. So you're focusing that so they can do it. So we want to make sure that we give them as much info upfront as we can. Okay. Verbs do the work instead. So the factory was bombed by an F-18, where military would say an F-18 bombed the factory. Okay. Short emails more effective than long emails. In the military, more explanation, list background about the bluff, bullet points received. The recipients can grasp what's going on. Prevent clogging. The military link to attachments rather than attaching files. Force the recipient to check the website that has the attachment, and so forth. So I'll let you kind of go through those. We have lots of slides. Again, and this was kind of interesting. I found an article that they were talking about when we kind of step into data analytics. And again, if you have any questions, please pop it in. We'll take a break in about 10-15 minutes. Generally, we'll have the one break in the class. We're going to, my understanding is we're going 7 to 9:30, typically 9:15, 9:20, again, to give you some time to get to your next class. All right. Me and my big red cup, and it's normally those would be beer for other places, but when in class, it's always a Coke. Half cherry zero, or was it half zero and half cherry? That way, Diet Coke doesn't taste like Diet Coke. All right. So this is kind of that concept of, as we're talking about information, data. What is data? Okay, data are a whole bunch of points. Okay, information is what we know about that data, what gives us something that we can make a decision. So with a data engineer, whatnot, we want to take this information and be able to present it to people. Well, okay, how would you present it to a 5-year-old? Okay, how would you explain data analysis if you're speaking to a 5-year-old? Why is it relevant? Testing functional understanding evaluates, well, you grasp the core principles. Simplifying complexity challenges you to explain intricate details, simple, relatable terms, a vital skill for the communicator or collaborator. Imagine the data analysis using chocolates, asking a child a fun question, which chocolate you like the most? Kit Kat, Cadbury, Hershey's. Child might pause to think, give an answer. It could be a single, or they might name multiple. Follow up with questions, and an open-ended question, because you have closed-end questions which are yes, no. They do not stimulate conversations, but an open-ended question where they have to give you a description or a descriptive answer. Okay, those encourage conversations. So they pick one. Let's see, why do you like this chocolate more than the others? They pick multiple. Then what is similar about these chocolate that makes you like them? Child might respond something like, it has more nuts, it's crunchy, or even, okay, they don't. I just like the wrapper, or they taste the same. Okay. Simplify. As they struggle and simplify the questions, which chocolate buy most often? Which chocolate does your friend like or buy? Have you tried others? Do your parents suggest it? What attracts you most? Do you like the wrapping or the color? So all of those, you can kind of build that full story of why the child prefers a particular brand of others. And that's marketing and sales. When we do marketing, what's really interesting is they always say in marketing that 50% of your dollars are wasted. It's just a question of which 50%, because marketing is inexact in how we do that. Then connect it to a bigger picture. Asking questions, analyzing responses, adjusting the approach, the essence of business analysis. Business shopkeepers use a technique to identify what the customers like, in this case, chocolates. Tailor their strategies to increase sales and profits. So it's not about numbers or algorithms, although that could be, what you're discussing, the right questions, understanding the patterns and answers, and making informed decisions. Whether it's a shopkeeper selling chocolates or a data scientist solving the real world problems. Okay, and so that's one of the techniques to do it to a 5-year-old. So, what is information? Okay, so let's kind of build on that. Where are we going with this? So, applying knowledge. So, we start at the bottom with period, data, the numbers. Okay, that's our foundation. Hourly temp, humidity, presentation, daily sales, weekly sales, daily website visits, whatever it is. So, then we're able to organize those. The readings organized continuum over the course of the day. So, there is more than just one number. There was an old joke years ago. They said, well, we have a partial score in a baseball game between two teams, and they would give one team in the score. Okay, and then they'd wait for a pause, and you're waiting for the second team, but it never comes. It's kind of, well, okay, partial score. Okay, then we have knowledge, identifying the pattern. Can we predict? Okay, so information is kind of building that summation, but knowledge is being able to pattern. Humidity rises, temperature drops, the atmosphere can hold less moisture. And then being able to take the wisdom, taking that knowledge and getting actions and transactions to be able to predict that pattern and things that we're trying to do. So that's clearly what we're trying to do with data analysis is build some of that and impart that, whether we create the knowledge, somebody else does, we import the wisdom. That's what we're trying to get to, because numbers are numbers. They're just a long series of digits. Talk to somebody that's in cyber to try and crack things. And to them, they just get this huge set of numbers. How do they get knowledge out of those numbers? So data is discrete raw facts about the given situation, no analysis or interpretation. Information, applied description and meaning to make it useful. The knowledge, the information, that's insight, content, a frame of reference applied. And so that frame of reference is important because numbers and crunch may not be appropriate for everything in every place. Okay, so where is it in that environment? What are the foundational issues? What are the technical, the T's and C's, terms and conditions, whatever it is that may be kind of running amok for what you have. And then wisdom. Knowledge is converted into wisdom by applying judgment and action to the information. Okay, so we can do something. All right, data sources, computers, sensor devices, and we're in the Internet of Things, IoT. So we're going to be grabbing data from absolutely everybody, and everybody wants open source data, and they want to have open data. So you have all these incredible data sets of information. So okay, what are we going to do with them all? There's incredible amounts of data, and a lot of people have had that philosophy of, well, let's put the data out there, and then somebody will do something with it. Okay, well, let's be the smart people that can do something with it. So form of numbers, use text, visual, graphic, sounds. There's a lot of different things out there. Analyze, create for information. So, if you're thinking about things underneath the water, okay, there are no visual. Water's murky. You can't see very far, but you can hear for miles. Okay, and so maybe it's all the sonic types of things. All right, so we have quantitative data expressed mathematically, qualitative that can't be expressed as numbers, text, audio. Think of you may have seen the Likert, Likert, Likert scale of the 5 points of you really hate it, it's okay, you like it, you really like it. Well, that's qualitative because you don't really have a thing because you don't know how far apart is really hate it and hate it as opposed to like and really like. Are they equal? Because you put 5 in a line, you think they're equal, and they may not be. Okay, and so the qualitative just kind of says some of the attributes type of thing. Timelines, informatic, word clouds. What is a word cloud? Is that where they will get the number counts at a certain time a word appears, and that word, the higher the number that it appears, the bigger the word is inside that cloud. So you've seen some of those, and we'll show those. Nominal data, data used to name or label a variable, used to measure things, put them in any order. Ethnicity, gender, eye color. Ordinal data within a range, a natural order. Incomes ranked. Ordinal is to rank items in priority or value. Discrete, categorical. Discrete categories or groups, male, female. Specific number of values are possible, which can't be subdivided. There is, even in our politically correct world, we're struggling with, well, there's male or female. How do you have between the two? Okay, if that's the problem. Is that X is, or do we go down to the scientific XX versus XY? And just as a side on those, keep in mind sometimes that we can't be politically correct. That you'd love to be able to give people those things in our world. You can't tell a nurse that, well, that I am a male when you were born a female because the nurse is looking for biological things that may be different, type of thing. So society and biology may not equal each other. Anyway, continuous data. Describe data measurable, observable in real time, measured on a scale and continuum, subdivided into to finer. So think of, we have integers, which are numbers, and we have floating point with decimal. Okay, so discrete the integers, the floating point just continues. We can just kind of keep adding decimal points. Data processing cycle is into three stages. Stage where data is collected from multiple sources, point of sale, call centers, sensors, anything we're trying to do. Data sorted, organized, cleansed, entered into a database, transformed into the format. And so we can actually do something. So we'll talk about data lakes and data warehouses and data marts and all those things of where is that data? What shape is it in? Is it something that we can actually work with? Okay, and the newly processed data is to send users stored. They will have access when it's needed. Okay, and so then you can go play. So typically we plan because part of it is trying to figure out what you can get. You would like to have everything, but you can't quite get everything. And so that can be a problem. And so that's part of our plan. We acquire what we can acquire. Okay, then we want to process it to clean it up. And we're going to talk about cleaning up data. Okay, and that data comes in and it's messed up. What happens if you're missing data? Okay, if data is not there for certain things, that really affects because if you do an average and you're missing information, you kind of make the assumption, well, the average will take care of those missing ones, and that may be wrong. That those missing values may be missing for a reason. Okay, not just an oops type of thing. There may be some other reason that we have to be able to look at. So we want to analyze. We want to integrate to be able to build it into the systems, the decision process, things that we're doing, and then we want to be able to store the information so that we can use it again. And when we store information, there is a lot of parts of that we have to be careful of in managing that. When we have things, one of the things we talk about is document retention. Even though we have incredible systems that we can literally keep everything forever, it's too expensive because everything you keep, you have to keep multiple copies of for backup and keep backup offsite and do all those things. And so, and from a legal perspective, if somebody wants to look at old data, if you have it, you have to give it to them. And data has value. We'll talk about data having value over time. Old data from 10, 15, 20 years ago it may have some relevance, but it probably doesn't. Okay. As a global impact, maybe, but a lot of times it won't. So if it doesn't, then why do we need to keep it? And anything we keep, we have to manage. So you want to get rid of stuff because then I have less to manage. So that's part of the store issue that we have. So what do we do for converting data? We'll take a break in about 5-10 minutes. Turn data into information, process and organize, present data in a way that has meaning, because we're trying to get that pattern. We're trying to be able to figure out how we can do some of those things. Information come from a reliable source of information. It cannot be partial or have details missing. Mechanisms must be in place to ensure new data doesn't contradict existing data. Okay, and so how do we, and it may be valid that, hey, opinion polls or whatnot, there may be something that how do we integrate these? Information be distinctive and add value, and then database be timely and up to date. Okay. All right, so information processed, analyzed, interpreted, used to make decisions, involves not the information, ability to examine it, wisdom, synthesis, to be able to put it in. So actually, we get this information, we figure out a pattern with knowledge, then we can do something. So that's our wisdom. Ultimately enables prediction of future events. Okay. AI is enabled to learn, problem solve, perform tasks, require human intelligence, technology used to look based on actions, best course of actions. Yes, and we've had the equivalent of AI for 20 something years. We just called them intelligent systems or decision support systems, DSS. And basically those were just rules. They said, and we had remote telemedicine for the last 20 years. And those are just rules where somebody goes in and says, do they have a fever? Well, if they don't have a fever, we look for this. If they do have a fever, then we look for these other things. And they just go down the symptoms list, just like an expert would. Buy and sell stock, play chess better than human. So they haven't quite gotten to the human wisdom. What was interesting is one of the AI stories was Donkey Kong, the video game. So there have been billions and billions of people that have played Donkey Kong, but AI actually found a pattern that was more effective than what any human had ever done. And the only reason it did is that AI looked at every possible move. And so when a human looked at the screen, there was a jump that was too far for a human to make, so they would go the other way. Well, the AI said the AI didn't know that. They just looked at literally every possible move from every point, and they were able to find some moves that weren't expected. And in the same way, that's a glitch. When we talk about cybersecurity is breaking things, okay, and doing something completely unexpected. Okay, so how do we build this? So AI is trying to figure out, okay, what are those unexpected types of things that you may not have run into? Can they create knowledge from nothing? No, not at this point. A lot of knowledge is already there. They're already synthesizing. They're pulling it in, and they're putting some relationships together. But those things that when you have that light bulb above your head in all the movies and you jump, it's amazing the things that you can do. But those aren't necessarily going to come from the systems. Okay, it's AI is the vast majority of AI is best practice. Okay, that it's going to be able to do. So we're going to be looking at this is that what do we do with this life cycle? We do a generation or capture, usually data entry, acquisition, external source, reception. So somehow or other, we got to get these numbers. Okay. Is it digital? Is it data entry? Are we scanning these in? What are we doing with this thing? How does it come in? The maintenance process, integration, scrubbing, and then we'll talk about extract, transform, load, basically. Okay. Get it out of whatever it is, transform it into your database, and then be able to load it into modules. Active, use data to support the organization's objectives and operations. Publication isn't necessarily to broader public, but since outside. So depending on what you're trying to do, depending on what, again, your small company, big company, what are you trying to do? International, your multiple locations, does that data make sense in other locations? Or is this marketing that is more effective in Vietnam versus Europe versus the US versus Africa, type of thing. Archiving, all data is removed from all active production, no longer processed, used or stored in case and needed again. So it's in an archive. Think of it as kind of historical. Usually archive data can't be changed. Okay, it's archive usually. And purging, okay, every copy of the data is deleted. Okay, and typically, if either been archived or it's reached the end of its document retention schedule. Digital lifecycle is becoming increasingly important because we've got too much dollars. So we got too many things. And one of the biggest problems people have, everything should be up in the cloud. Well, the problem we have with cloud is that people don't manage their cloud accounts and they're getting huge bills. So we're actually seeing a lot of people come back to having stuff locally and only having cloud up stuff that's appropriate. Because if you leave it in the cloud, one of the things about using storage in the cloud when you have to pay for it is you pay to put it up, you pay to leave it there, and you pay to use it. So you're paying all the time. And if you just have a little bit and you're just using it a little bit and you're not keeping it that long, then cloud makes sense. But if you've got huge volumes, it may or may not make sense. All right, data science. And we're going to step into this. Let's go ahead, 6:06. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break or 9 minutes, come back at 6:15 or 6:16. It just clicked over. So take just around. That way you can do a tea refresher, a coffee refresher, or anything that you need for your beverage of choice. And we turn off the recording for the moment. Pause. All right, off and running again. Again, if you have questions, please pop them in chat or speak up. No problem. Happy to go either way. Anyway, okay. So what is data science? Okay, and this is kind of where AI kind of steps in a little bit as we look at some of these descriptions and whatnot. But different techniques to obtain answers, incorporate computer science, analytics, statistics, all the various tools that we have to get solutions to things we haven't thought of yet. Okay, main goal is to ask questions, locate avenues of study, less concerned with answers and more the emphasis of finding the questions. And that's one of the biggest questions, and especially as you get through your business career, are you asking the right question? In the military and business and finance and whatnot, you'll have lots of numbers, lots of statistics, lots of things, but are you giving the answer that can be used, type of thing? So that's a really important. So experts accomplish by predicting potential trends and exploring separate and disconnected data sources. And I think that's where AI comes in because it looks and AI is a huge number cruncher. And so it's able to do comparisons between existing things, but it can't quite do that leap of faith. That's where humans do really well is to have that where our neurons inside our brain, whatever the chemistry is, that they all of a sudden do that jump and you're able to think of that completely new and different thing that's not inside the programming of AI yet. Okay. When it does, and AI start thinking for themselves, well, then we can have the results of what might be in some of the science fiction movies. Uh, Processing, perform existing data sets, concentrate creating methods, capture, organize, uncover actionable insights. When we talk about data mining, everything is what is actionable. Okay, what is it? If I'm not doing an analysis that will actually give me something that's actionable, I don't care because it's a waste of time. I want to be able to do, okay, give me something, some answers or whatnot that I can actually do something with. Okay, encompasses a few different branches, broader statistics, simplify the results so even us gray-haired managers can understand. All right, so data science and big data are unique. Major differences scope. Data science umbrella group of fields used to mine large data sets. It looks more focused on this, even considered part of the larger question of exploration. Data science isn't concerned with specific queries, instead parsing through massive data sets, sometimes unstructured, to expose insights. Works better when it's focused, questions in mind. Data science produces broader, that concentrated questions should be asked. And while big data emphasizes discovering answers to the questions being asked, okay? And let's see, so kind of a what, why should we, and then what is it? Kind of the distinction between the two. More concerned at fixing, asking questions and finding specific field, potential trends, existing data. Okay. So the data science versus data analytics. So I kind of like these graphs. I always like things with concrete answers. I don't like things that are very generic and wide open to interpretation, only because they're scary, because everybody interprets things a little bit differently based on backgrounds, bias, knowledge, whatever. All right, decision. The actor deciding the moment a decision to come, determining is arrived at after consideration. So what is data-driven decision making? So a DDDM, okay, so yeah, you get initials. And when we talk about language, learning acronyms is one of the most important things. When we do cyber, there are tons of acronyms. And the hard part is a lot of times, for the example, the letters MAC mean four different things in cybersecurity. So it's all about concepts. So what is a MAC? Well, it's media access control, electronic serial number. It's a mandatory access control. It's a product by Apple. I mean, there are tons of things out there. So learning acronyms is like learning a foreign language. But once you do, people tend to speak. And that's true whether you're electricians, whether you're military, whether you're finance. You're going to learn a vocabulary for that field. And that vocabulary is just shortcuts. I mean, they don't want you explain a term or a concept with one term as opposed to trying to explain the whole term the whole time. All right, so data is driven is using facts, metrics, data to guide the decisions. Everyone, whether you're analyst, manager, HR, is empowered to make better decisions. You're going to have data. Now, are those decisions going to be right? Maybe not, but that's okay because you've got supporting things. And that's no different. It's better than intuition. It's better than let's just make a guess and just go and there is something to be said for that in military, whatnot, do you have a choice? You go right or you go left? We're going right. Why? Well, I want to go right. Everybody needs to kind of go in the same way. And there may be support, may not. Data-driven decision making says, hey, let's get some info to try and help that decision beforehand. Let's see, make it the norm, create a culture. And part of that is this idea is that we want people to be self-service. And what's interesting is over time, we used to have secretarial support because the boss didn't want to type up the papers. They weren't paid to learn how to type 50 words a minute, type of thing. And that's only from the 70s or 80s that we really still had heavy secretarial support. But then everybody really learned a keyboard and they ended up typing their own memos. And where now the dictation went away in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. And people were able to, now we do voice into those types of things. So a lot of the data that's in there, the data driven, that we can be self-service. So that you can do that and you can find those tools and being able to have access to those data sets. Now, from a cyber part of view, it's hard to manage because then we have the decisions of who should have access to which data. So data-driven decision making says, hey, everybody should have it because in theory you should have everything. But then we have the ethical and the business and the privacy concerns of, okay, who gets access to what? And so you get to be the gatekeeper as to what we change and what we don't. Encourage data-driven across all job levels, business groups. So the more info that we track, the more info that we have, the better that we can do a better job. Reported 98.6% of executives indicate the organization aspires to be data-driven. Part of it's a buzzword. Part of it, hey, you are going to do better if you're data-driven. So everybody says we'll be data-driven. Well, are they really? No. And so that's, there are a lot of things out there that people will say that we are, but they don't really have that. And you'll find that it's amazing when you look at countries, you look at businesses. Well, you should be doing these things, and we can't. We haven't gotten there yet. We don't have the people, the resources to do certain things, and so we're kind of still doing it the old way. Well, but that was 10 years old. Well, yeah, that's still the way we do it because we don't have the ability. And you're going to come out of schools and with incredible insight, incredible ideas that you're going to be able to do it, and it is going to get frustrated because you're going to go into places that aren't able to do the change. Not necessarily that they don't want to. In some cases, they don't. But most of the time, it's going to be we just don't have time. We can't. How do we change? Kind of companies, countries, they're all very risk adverse. Because if I spend a bunch of money and nothing happens, well, that's all direct profits. Or it can be negative things. I could be going down the wrong path. And in some cases, decisions will lead to bankruptcy. So a lot of times people are very risk adverse when they use that information. And we'll talk about that when we talk about key indicators and risk profiles and things like that. Let's see, data-driven or development three core, data proficiency, analytics, agility, and community, making sure that basically it's available, that you have the people that are smart enough. And that's one hard part is do people know the tools enough to be smart enough to use Excel, even use the simple tools to be able to get some of this information? And what's the difference between a database and a spreadsheet? And we'll talk about some of those. And how can we do that? The data's there. There is incredible potential. Can we make it work for us? But can we make it work for us that's effective? Because the more time I spend doing things, there are certain projects. For example, if you work on an organization that does mapping, that maps and does GIS, and incredible. I worked with GIS data sets for years, and the number of things that you can do are just absolutely incredible, and it really gets information across quickly, but it's incredibly expensive to set up because there's a lot of data and a lot of time and whatnot. So is that worth it? But from a data-driven position, of course it is, but you have to make that decision from a business perspective. It's the end of the day. My dad owned a small company and he had between 10 and 25 employees, depending on how good the economy was. And anything that was profit, from a 10-person company is right out of his pocket. So if you say that, hey, we're going to take all this investment, that comes right out of his pocket of a 10-person company. So, we have a lot of small organizations that just don't have the resources to do some of those where schools and government, whatnot, may have a little bit more option to do some of that. All right, so the value, some of the ones that are out there, Lufthansa, the airline group in Germany, increased organization by 30%. a Medicare or hospital group, Providence St. Joseph, improve quality and cost of care. Charles Schwab, the financial advisor. Corporation increase speed to business insights. One of the critical things when we do marketing, when we do business, is what is time to market? Okay, how fast? We get this great idea. We want to be the first out there to get the biggest advantage. There are a lot of things out there that are going to be duplicate and steal ideas from each other. What's really funny is one of the highest security industries is actually the toy industry. And it's funny because why is the toy industry one of the highest level security ones that they have? Because the ideas are very short lived. You have an idea, you go out and everybody gets excited, they buy the toy, and then all the other competitors say, hey, that's a great idea. I'm now jumping into that market. And so all of a sudden you have lots of competition. So you have to, there's a saying, you make the hay where the sun shines. The idea is that you are the only one, the leader. You need to make as much money as you can because competition is going to come in, kill it. Because in business, we call a barrier to entry. How hard is it to get into that field? Well, toys, it's not. They're plastic, they're metal, they're games, they're digital. To make a copycat is not hard. So it won't take you very long to do that. So we have AI powered. So you're going to have AI, and then you ML. See that term vocabulary is machine learning, and we'll talk about the different types of machine learning. Predictive, prescriptive analysis. Basically, what are we doing for predictions? What are some of these tools that we can use to help us to say, okay, what is that trend? So where are we in that trend? We're going to be able to do a mapping on a curve, and so we can figure out where we are in that curve. Data visualization. Reports, be able to get that information out. The picture is worth 1,000 words, whether it's a dashboard or a map or something. It shows relativity. And that's like I said earlier about the Likert scale of what is the difference in impact between not like as opposed to hate or okay, type of thing. What are those differences? Is that equal or whatnot? Well, when we put it on a map and you do that, you're able to impart that as opposed to a 5 scale. You don't have that info. So how do we visualize and get that information across? Embedded analytics, the products, the portals, the tools, the more systems that we have integrated, the better. Now, when we talk about this, when we talk about embedded analytics, can it spit out numbers and can our tools get those numbers? Now, for you as a practitioner, the world would love to have what's called an ERP, Enterprise Resource Product, which basically is one tool, one program that do everything. It'll do HR and business and finance and inventory and sales and marketing. It does absolutely everything because it's all integrated. But in the real world, nobody likes those tools because they're not best of breed. A lot of times they're written for finance and the sales guys don't like that. And the actual field guys don't like it because sales want certain pieces of info and they want to focus on that. So the field guys want something different. So everybody usually, and I learned that from the cities, all these different organizations, police and fire and public works, they all use information a little bit differently. And so they want a system that focuses on what's important to them. Well, trying to get these information and systems to talk is just next to impossible. But when we do SQL and we do some of these things, we can at least get some of that info, and then it's up to us to try and put it together. So the embedded are great and some of the tools, but they're still locked. We'll talk about silos. A company has an information silo, SILO. It's a grain silo. It comes from when a farmer has all the corn, he puts the corn in the corn silo, he puts the wheat in that, the oats in the oat silo, and then the train comes and takes them away. Well, the oats and the wheat and the corn or whatnot are never going to get mixed, so they're in their own separate silos. But that's how we have information. We have information silos. So we need to be able to break in and get that information. All right, so we won't worry about summary. We'll kind of crank through. So process of collecting data, the key performance indicators. So KPIs. And we're going to have a lecture on KPIs, the key performance. But basically, think of it as your numbers. What are your sales numbers? What are the things? What is your risk? What are those? What are the things that you are going to worry about for computers' uptime? Okay. What are the things that you're going to measure? And so we want to be able to do those decisions around the things that we can measure. We go back to that one earlier chart that said, what is it that we'd like to measure and then acquire data? So what can we get? Because we know we can't get everything that we would like. And so how do we collect and kind of build those together? And then we use the BI, the business intelligence tools, to be able to process that and put it up on a pretty chart. So Power BI, we're going to do that tool to put up pretty dashboards and say, okay, you're going to put up a dashboard for users, you're going to put a dashboard up for managers, because everybody has a little bit different viewpoint. And so what information is important to individuals, it's not uniform. Okay, you want to do something custom for each person's area of expertise. All right, fact, define patterns, inferences, insights. To do, without, and this is the critical, and this is kind of that getting back to what I was saying about military, and the police do that as well when they describe things. They don't say the hot rod, they say the vehicle. Okay, they don't want to color unnecessarily and unfairly in a lot of cases something. So they're not adding a lot of superfluous, so extra adjectives and whatnot. So what is it that we want to do it without bias? Because as you add bias, you're going to add expectations. Us as humans, everything we do, we look at profiles. You look at a person, what they're wearing, what they look like, and you already set expectations. Everybody does. And in theory, we need to look at everybody equally. And the old saying, you can't read a book by its cover, all those types of things. So, we want to make sure that the biases that are not entering into our analysis, and we do that a lot. We need to look at that in data mining a bunch. Okay. All right, roadmap, the patterns extracted, whether and rather than what you like or dislike. Our likes and dislikes are not part of it because we need to know what we like and what we don't like. We need to know what that is so we can be careful of the bias, because that we may, if we don't like something, we don't capture it, we may not be able to interpret it. And if we don't like it, we may not have enough data to get rid of it. So it's a good thing to get data so we can figure out. Okay. All right. Most informed decisions stem for data, measure business goals, populate in real time, the reporting. Support data includes how to drive profits, how to establish good management behavior, optimize operation, improve team performance. I think biggest thing that's not said here is transparency. We need to make sure that there is transparency as we look at people's performance, corruption, dollars. I mean, what's an auditor do? An auditor goes through an organization and looks for the effective and efficient use and the legal use of business resources. Okay, if you are a private person that own the company, okay, it's your dollars. You pay all those people, and if whatever you want to do with the profits, that's your company. You can do what you want. But as a public company, as a government, no, you don't own that money. The public, the shareholders, they own that money, and you have a due diligence to them to be honest. And so that the auditors need to do that to be able to reflect on that. Okay. So what are the steps that we're actually going to do is kind of have guidelines, have a goal, have the vision, what we're going to do. Okay. Now we know what we want. We would love to be able to get it, but what can we get? So find the data sources. Okay. Put it together, organize, perform the data analysis to actually use the tools. Okay. Is this Excel, data mining, R, Python, something in the cloud, whatnot. And then we're putting that, and then we can put out a bluff memo to draw conclusions and say, okay, this is what we found. Here is the knowledge. Here is the pattern. Here is what we've seen. And then what the suggestions would be the wisdom. All right. So the graphs figure letter meaning without context. Yeah, I can give you a whole chart of numbers, but unless you know what the numbers are relative to, it doesn't matter anything. I mean, think of I can give you a 10-digit serial number, and that it has almost no meaning unless you're able to understand that the first 5 digits are the vendor. All vehicles have a VIN, a VIN, vehicle identification number, because in that number it says what the manufacturer is, what the model number is, what the serial number is of the car. All of that's inside the VIN. Okay, so but unless you know how that number breaks up, it's a whole bunch of numbers. All right, yearly objectives, key results, all those things. Find data sources to do the goals. So some general success, gross profit margin. Okay, cost of goods sold from net sales. Okay, return on investment for all the finance folks in there. What are we doing? The productivity, producing goods, security, calculated, divided by total output. But all of this is subject to a lot of interpretation, a lot of numbers, and a lot of footnotes. As you guys write in the finance and marketing worlds, and you write reports, and you say, okay, here are the footnotes about these statistics, where they came from, and whatnot, so that somebody can actually document why. Total numbers of customers. What's funny is we had one KPI for a water company, and think of a water company. They sell each month water to residences, but it's not like you're building a whole bunch of new residences. It's a small water company. And so they said, we do 10,000 bills every month. Well, yeah, every month you're going to do the same 10,000. So the number doesn't make any sense because you're not going to less or more. It's going to be the same 10,000 customers every month. So it's kind of weird. So, what is productivity? People get hung up on numbers. Unless the number gives you something towards knowledge, it's a number. So what? Total number, let's see, recurring revenue used by software as a service. So SaaS, for those not familiar with it, software as a service. So those are the cloud-based software providers. Amount of revenue generally by active customers during a specific period. Other data sets on your job role, vision towards it, and try and keep a connected story. So we go back to we're telling a story. Organize the data. If you can see all your relevant data in one place, understand it connects, different, ensure making the most informed, executive dashboards to do it, universal reporting tool, all those types of things. After we catch up, all right. Form data analysis, extract the actionable insights. Again, data mining. What can we get from this data? Why am I trying to look at it? What part of that vision? Okay, what is it that I'm building? Painting your goals, analyze the data from executive dashboard and tandem, case studies, surveys, testimonials. How your team wants to provide the SEO tools to make it more competitive. Competitors, performance data, current software performance. The SEO, search engine optimization. Took me a moment. It's kind of, wait a minute, SEO, yep. So, think about that, your website. Friend of mine is for WebMD, the website there. He's a technical manager, and Google changed all of a sudden their things internally and didn't tell anybody. So all the websites that are based on Google and whatnot, they had to quickly, all of a sudden their search engine optimizations were all wrong. So they had to quickly change them because you're dependent on Google, and Google doesn't tell you what they do. So it was interesting to follow that. So current users on search optimization and marketing tools may obtain some new external sources, analytics, those types of things. Draw a conclusion. So you and I are analysts, okay? When I was a director, I was a decision maker. But now we're analysts. We are providing that information. We will suggest conclusions. And in the military, I had one is that, staff officers make recommendations, generals make decisions, okay? That's the directors, the owners of the company. They're the ones that make the decisions. We need to make and give them all the information possible. Now, keep in mind, one of the things I followed in my career is I trust my boss. I don't necessarily trust my boss's boss because they have information I don't have. So they're going to do what's right for the company. And I may be mad at something, but they're going to do what's right because they have extra information I don't know. So I want to provide them everything I can. I want to make my boss as successful as possible. Okay, and so that's my job. I work for them. I want to get them, and then through them, his boss, I want to get them all the information we can. So, we want to provide those systems that are going to do that for the conclusions. So what am I seeing I already know? What new information did I learn? How can I use this information that I gained to meet my business goals? What value is it? So this is those actionable insights. So what is it? Then we're ready to do the additions, okay? And then we do the SMART goals, which is the simple, marketable. Oh gosh, now I have to remember the acronym SMART. And it basically, simple, manageable. I'm going to have to look that up. But basically, it's if somebody wants to look it up and put it in chat, super. But basically, yeah, it's a way of saying, we want to think, A is achievable type thing, and I think T is timely. So whatnot, so goals, because you need to do things that you can do in the amount of time that are money, that are simple, there aren't huge complex. It's going to take a lot of understanding. So e-commerce, shopping online, wondered getting certain recommendations, a recommender system, online market, track the journeys and metrics, click-through rate, bounce rate, who engage in the most, finance, multitude, ranging from assessing risk to customer segmentation. So these are going to be some of the things that you can do for your example, for your the real world example, whether it's dashboards, e-commerce, the data decision making. These are going to be some of the samples that you guys can do. Again, you can use any experience anywhere because the more experiences we have, the better we can kind of put all these together. Transportation, determining safe transportation. We've been doing transportation for 40 years because first thing we did was route optimization. You know what? If you're loading a truck, you want to load a truck so that the things that come off first are in the back. So you want to load the things that come off last first. So they come into the back. So you don't have to route through the whole truck to find everything. And it was really interesting is that one company even tried to schedule their trucks to always make right-hand turns because left-hand turn, so in the US, you know, your right-hand turn, you can go against a red because you're driving on the right. So it was more efficient because left-hand turns always took longer. And so it was interesting. So we've been doing that, and we call that operations research, OR, and it's been around like mechanical, industrial engineering. Those things have been around since the 60s. But now everybody makes it, hey, it's decision making. And you're going to find through your career, there are a lot of concepts that will have a term, they'll go away and they'll come back with a new name, but it's the same basic concept. You're going to find that. So a lot of things are cyclical, that they're going to come, those ideas that are great ideas, they come around again. Okay. All right. Benefits, make confident decisions, guard against biases. That's one of the critical things. And one of the phrases that I love the most, there we go, thank you. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Oh, I love those. Okay. One of the biggest things is guard against biases. The phrase that I don't have or that I really like is you don't know what you don't know. Okay. We don't know what our biases are. They just kind of creep in. And when we have things, if we knew everything, okay, there wouldn't be mistakes, there wouldn't be errors. We don't know about something. And so we don't know what we don't know. If we did know, we would have fixed it, type of thing. Okay, so that's part of those biases. Unresolved questions, okay, again, asking the right questions, measurable goals, and improve the company processes. Okay, how can we be more efficient to do the things that we're doing? Confident decisions, okay, guard against biases, again, we'll get caught up. You can read through those slides. Measurable goals. Measurable goals is an important one of what is that in that part of the SMART. What's achievable by what time? Reduce project government, whatnot. And the one that I like as an example is improve customer service. Okay. Okay, how do we improve customer service by a goal? Okay, is the number of phone calls. When I worked for the courts, there was a number of phone calls dropped. So people would call in and they would try and get help with their traffic ticket or whatever over the phone, but the waiting time was like 10 or 15 minutes. So one of our metrics was how many people dropped without getting answered. They just had to wait too long. How do we kind of measure that? Because that would improve customer service. The other one I like is returns. Okay, if you can measure and reduce the number of returns, then you're going to improve customer service. And also as dollars, because think of a company. You send something out and it's wrong, okay? Then somebody's paid for transit. Then you send it back. Generally the company is going to pay to take it back. And when they do, they're going to have to ship something new. So, okay, they have to save some shipping and whatnot. So we're already paid for shipping, but then the product that comes back is technically used. So now all of a sudden I got to sell that good product at no profit or at a loss just to get rid of it so I get some money back. Okay, but so that is all part of the normal marketing and sales process. How can I improve customer service? Well, if I have less returns, I improve customer service. Okay, so can I do that through the return process? Can I do that from something else? Okay, so I like that one kind of as an example. All right, and it kind of blends into the company process. Improve with data may include risk management, financial, cost estimation, market pricing, team member onboarding, new performance hires, customer survey based on customer feedback. One of the tools we use in data mining is sentiment analysis. And what sentiment analysis does, and every now and then I look down at the English translation to make sure it's saying it correctly, because I love it when the Google translates incorrectly. It's like, really? Where did that come in? Again, AI is not perfect. So sentiment analysis is the idea of looking for good words and bad words. Okay. When, it may not be smart enough to interpret every sentence, but it's able to look for a bunch of key words. We don't care about the various words, prepositions of the and a and those types of things, but we want the adjectives. And whatnot we count. So how many positive adjectives and how many negative? So are the comments being more positive or more negative type of thing? All right, so find the story, analyzing, look for patterns, meanings, consult the data, learning data visualization. Okay, and again, we're going to be playing with a bunch of that. So we'll go through all those. All right. Now, what's interesting is understanding the issue at hand. What are key points of data? And think of an election. Election, you get all these advertisements and whatnot, you get sound bites. But a sound bite does not tell the whole story. There are a lot of issues that you have, and immigration, and those are an issue for every country. And that can be a soundbite because they don't talk about the whole situation. And our world is such a complex point of view. It can't be done. Now, we have what's called an elevator speech, if you ever heard that term. An elevator speech is if you want to tell somebody a concept, you have the length of time an elevator goes up 5 floors, 6 floors, something like that to explain. That's an elevator speech, very short and to the point. But does that hit enough details to make sense? Okay. Yes. So earlier we talked about how to dumb it down and get the point across, but we have to be careful that you don't overrun and make it too simple. Okay. Do you know them? How are you exploring supported decision versus exploring type of thing? It's interesting in California. We've had a couple good years of water. Is there a drought? Where's the water stored? How do you measure when people talk about snowpack? Okay, what is that? Because in California, the vast majority of the water comes from the snowpack up in the Sierra Mountains, and Northern California feeds Southern California with a lot of water. But do we care about how thick it is? Well, one of the parts about snowpack is not only how thick it is, but how wet it is, because snow has a water density. Utah is an incredible ski place because everybody loves it because the snow is so dry. Typically, when you're coming off the oceans, you'll have a more moist and more water content. So those are part of kind of what we're doing. Climate change. What is a normal pattern? We don't know. If we look back at 1776, some famous things in U.S. history, George Washington crossed the Delaware, there were icebergs in the river. There were never been icebergs in that river since. The Renaissance in Europe was at the end of a climate change. That they had a kind of a mini ice age. And so all of a sudden there's longer summers and we had more growth and we have things. What is that? And we say we're changing. Now, yes, humans are causing a whole bunch of things. Okay, granted, I think that's a given and we may be accelerating, but we don't understand the natural processes as well. So we need to look at both sides to be able to get information for the decision makers to make the best decision that they can. Do we have enough data? Okay, do we understand that we're doing? One of the biggest comparisons is cars, gas versus EVs in the US, where at one point everybody said, hey, we're going to have only EVs. In 5 years, you cannot buy a gas guzzler car. Well, now they're actually backtracking and saying, nope. And one of the biggest reasons for that is that for the Americans, they're very hung up about, well, 200 miles, no, that's not long enough. I need to be able to go a little bit higher. We are all used to our habits, and that's for right or wrong. Okay, and the culture in Vietnam and your background and whatnot may be completely different, but from a U.S. perspective, they want a normal car gets 400 miles to a tank, roughly 354. So we're all used to that. So if you give me an EV that gives me 400 or 450, then I'm fine. And my take on that is when solid state batteries come out, they'll be cheaper. You'll get lighter, so the whole car gets lighter. There's less fire damage. Or fire, because that's a lot of energy to go boom and burn. When firefighters see an electric vehicle on fire, they just let it burn. There's nothing they can do. All the lithium and whatnot. So a solid state will do incredible things. And what's interesting is you look at all the car manufacturers, all of them are looking different solid state technologies. So it'll be interesting to see which solid state technology actually wins out. And this is kind of as a side note too, in that technology is market driven. IBM, when I was an IBMer, we had some of the best technology in the world, but we charged too much. IBM wanted to make too big a profit, and that let Microsoft and some of the others actually set some of the tools. So we had a technology called Token Ring, which is a better networking technology, but Ethernet is good enough. So why would I want to pay extra? Think of cars, a Chevy and a low end will get you from here to there. You don't need the Cadillac with actually all of the stuff. In the US, your Chevy, then your Oldsmobile Buick is in the middle, and then your Cadillac is at the high end type of thing. At what point do you need to spend money, and what point is it vanity or just fun? Type of thing. But what is it from a business perspective? No, the low end trucks get you from point A to B, and the stuff, that's what we care about. Okay. So how do we do it? Commuters, gas guzzlers, so all those. So what are the true issues? What are the questions that we're trying to answer? Make sure that you listen to both sides. Okay, there are going to be multiple viewpoints. I mean, when you talk about relationships, in that same way, male, female, there are different viewpoints on these things, and you really have to have empathy and listen to both sides and see where those details are. Everybody's viewpoint is their vision of reality. Okay. And that's the hard part. How things work is what you're used to, and that may or may not be the case. So we need to be able to look and see what there are and do it without emotion. The military, police, and whatnot to try and take emotion out, because when we work for cities, you'll have somebody come in and talk about dog shelters and whatnot, and we should spend any amount of money we can to save one kitten type of thing. And, is that effective? Maybe, maybe not, depends. But that's from their viewpoint, that's their emotion type of thing. But is that what you're going to be basing decisions on? Okay, that's your call. So that's what we have to address. How do we address the key issues of the alternate opinions? How do we bring them in? How do we do the vast decisions? There's a famous thing about decisions, and you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. Okay, and that was from a gentleman named Zig Ziglar years ago, and basically everything's kind of a negotiation. It's viewpoint. So how do we do that? So one of the things we did from the IBM sales model, and was part of being a trainee for a year for IBM, was one of the key things is you develop that relationship. People buy from the people they like. Okay, court cases are judged on the jury opinion of the attorney. If you like the attorney, you don't like the attorney, yeah, that changes the court opinion. If the attorney is a complete jerk, no, we're probably not going to like the offense or defense, depending which the attorney is for. Biggest thing that we did inside IBM is you identify and address objections. The IBM sales model was basically you establish rapport, say, hey, we'll be friends because you only buy from your friends. Then what is it that you need? Let me give you a system. And then you ask the question, what are your objections? And if I can address your objections, will you buy from me? So you put the people on the model. And so that was the IBM sales model. You ask for the order, and then once you get the order, we're done. And we're going to support you and do the thing. So that was kind of different than that most salespeople, a lot of people going out sales, they don't actually ask for the order. No, you have to be bold enough to go say no. And if I can address everything, so if you have all these objections and I can address them, then you should be giving me the order. And it puts them in a spot where it makes them very hard to say no. Okay, and the sales, that's what we want. So here's some TED Talks. Mind-boggling amount of data floating. This has been pondering how store and share error massive data. So we have one for big data. Go ahead and read that again, 6 minutes long. So no big deal. We have another one, big data is better data. Again, and these are this one's 15 minutes long. These are just listen for content, listen for the key ideas, because they're really thought stimulating on what they have. They are older, but they've really stood the test of time. Now, some of the things may have been adjusted a little bit for being, in some cases, 10 years old, but you'd be surprised how many of these concepts are still there. All right, so let's talk about from a data-driven. Okay, so one of the points I wanted to bring up is kind of the fun one, is as I drink here is my big red mug here for a Coca-Cola. Okay. And yes, it is Coca-Cola. I am not pulling your leg. It's funny is that people will have that sound bite and have something and say, oh, this is terrible for you. Okay. Well, in my view of is that typically Um, everything is in moderation. I mean, humans we're built in moderation. We don't have absolutely everything. We're not hummingbirds that all we do is eat nectar through a long nose or something like that. There's or an anteater. No, we're kind of omnivores, and so vegetarians, whatnot. Sometimes they don't get enough. A friend of mine, she swore that she will not have any salt. And so she swore off salt. So no soda, no anything because they had added salt, whatnot. So at one point she passed out, and the paramedics had to give her literally a tablespoon of salt. Okay, because there is the electrolytes and things that are needed in the body. So we need a mix. You don't want to go overall for anything. So we look at like Coca-Cola. Well, Coca-Cola is bad because that's an acid. And if you use a mild acid on your battery terminals, when your car battery terminals are a little bit old, they'll get a little bit of the chemical solids on there, and you can use that to clean that off so you get a better electrical connection. So obviously that's bad to do for you, and it has too much sodium to add to you. Well, yeah, don't drink that many Cokes. Okay. If we look at the scurvy, if you get scurvy by not having enough vitamin C, and that's the seafarers in the 1700s. If they didn't have natural fruit, they got scurvy. Okay. Well, we need to have that, and that's an acid. Okay. Well, you need to have acid. Vitamin C is an acid. So yes, you do technically need to have an acid in some of the things you do. Even 1 or 2 colors can increase type 2 diabetes by more than 20%. Yeah, but what else are you doing? Okay, it's more, are you actually active or are you sedimentary? Are you drinking enough water? Because anything that like water will flush that out of your system. High cholesterol, excess fat, all increase the heart of risk control. Cold sugary drinks linked to increased pancreatic cancer. Okay, now that one, again, it's going to be that. Well, there actually have been 2 studies. Water causes cancer. Okay, tap water. Well, the study they did showed that the person was drinking like a 55-gallon drum of water. It was a rat or whatnot, equivalent of a 55-gallon drum for their size. And so that doesn't make sense. Okay, and another one was strawberries cause cancer. Well, they were again feeding somebody multiple flats of strawberries a day. Bodies aren't designed for that. Okay, so that's we have to be careful about these sound bites. What is it, and does it make sense? Okay. How would why, if Coke is so bad, why would you consume it? Yes, we shouldn't smoke, but we smoke, and we, shouldn't eat the things we do because we really like them. I mean, humans are frail, but how would you analyze it? What data you want? How would you compare Coca-Cola compared to smoking or drinking alcohol? Somebody's going to come along and say, well, they know better than we do and that they should outlaw Coke because it's as bad as smoking or drinking alcohol. No, it's not as bad. And is smoking or drinking alcohol bad? No. Well, we know pregnant women that are pregnant should not smoke or drink alcohol because it goes in the blood and they're developing. But that's because that's a very small critter inside compared to a human. When you're 100 to 200 pounds, okay, a little bit of impact. If you look at science, the definition of an environment is something that can be a ecosystem that can have a little bit of permutation, but that can right itself. Okay, that can then fix that and go back to that. It's stable. Okay, so we're stable environments. So a little bit of that should be able to bring that back. Now you have too much, okay, you're not going to be stable. So given that, I want to kind of build in, we're going to have some discussion questions. And again, we'll fix the learning management system. In there will be the discussion questions. Everybody will be adding in discussion questions or answers to those. And we're going to talk about business prediction. So there are a whole bunch of them in here. And given the time that we are, I'll start cranking through some of these, and I'll let you read through the specific ones. And a lot of these are somewhat dated, and I want you to find newer ones. But basically, these are where somebody goes out and they just guessed wrong, okay? And they used all the numbers, they used all these things, and we're going to see one about an American election. Well, back in the days before of instant surveys and whatnot, they actually printed in the newspaper the wrong name. Because they thought, from a presidential election, they thought Dewey was going to win, and actually, no, it was President Truman that actually won. And there's a famous photo of him holding up the newspaper with the wrong part. So there's a famous comment from Bill Gates in Microsoft. He said, you'll never need more than 100 basically, you'll never need more than a gig to do anything. And it's a 384K because That's all that was available in the system, and the programs were so small. Well, heck, now more than a gig. You have a phone that has 128 gigs on it at least, or 64 gigs. So I mean, not even close to being correct. So this is kind of where we want to be able, and so we want to look at these from a data driven and see where they are and where they went wrong. And so that's going to be one of the things that you're going to do in the data discussion. Business Week failure Japanese cars. They're not likely to carve out a big slice in 1968. Well, the issue there when the Japanese cars in the U.S. market was they were terrible. That was Japan was still recovering from World War II and the manufacturing. But what they did is they embraced quality control. They embraced statistics and the analysis. And they also had a different model. The U.S. had a model that you're going to buy a car every 100,000 miles. So that's all I care about. I want the car to last 100,000 miles, then you come buy a new one. The Japanese said, nope, I want quality. And so you're lasting the 300, 400, 500 mile. And the U.S. manufacturers thought, yeah, the people won't care. The people did care. And so that's really what kicked the Japanese sales up type of thing. Decca Records saying that, yeah, the Beatles will never amount to anything. Well, that's personal choice. And it's hard to see a revolution company type of thing. And very similar in the military. They say you always fight the last war because that's the one we understand. So wars change. In the U.S., the Civil War was different than the Mexican-American War, than World War I, World War II, Korea War had a significant of what they were trying to do and accomplish. So J.K. Rowling, one author said, the author for Harry Potter series, it won't imagine anything. And that's why she actually changed and used the initials because they were afraid of a female author, which was kind of silly, but that makes an impact. Okay, so she didn't. It was funny is that the other interesting story is that she got divorced right before she published all of that. So her husband, it was obviously ugly at that point for them to get divorced, but it's interesting that husband missed out. Let's see, IBM. IBM, I sold photocopiers. My job as an intern in college was copier protects. The idea of somebody is leasing a copier. I want to make sure they're happy so they continue to lease. And IBM said, yeah, no, Xerox, yeah, we'll do it. And they'll do it. So then, they basically blew it. You missed the market. So what are those errors? Movie producers say the TV won't amount to anything. Ken Olson was in charge of a large computer company called DEC Digital Equipment Corp. And they just didn't see the business and all the other parts because they didn't see the social. They didn't see the games. They didn't see any of that they could view. They just saw what it is, and they couldn't envision computers because over time, computers still cost the same amount of money as they cost 30, 40 years ago. The first Apples came out. They cost $500 to make, and Apple said, we're going to charge you $500. So the Apple IIc, you're going to buy it for $1,000. What's interesting, high-end computers are still about $1,000, but it's amazing. They're just always bigger, cheaper, faster. Okay, I'm sorry, smaller, cheaper, faster, bigger capabilities, but smaller, cheaper, faster. So they always put together all of those tip of things together, but they still charge the same. Right before a new computer comes out, the manufacturers always drop price on the old one to make room at the top for the new one. Okay, we see that in cell phones. They're coming out when the Google Pixel is about ready to come out with the 10. So right now all the things are coming out and saying, okay, what are the pricing going to be? The one I like here is for FedEx, who becomes the world leader in package when they basically built the overnight model being successful. And Yale professor said, yeah, that won't ever work. Kind of like, okay, just because a professor is a professor, that doesn't make them, correct in absolutely everything. And I can easily be wrong. I have no problem with that. Okay, it's a discussion. It's my viewpoint, but let's talk about things and see how we make them better. And that's how the world changes. Okay, I don't want to fight the last fight. I want to fight the fight that's coming up. Okay. All right. And so things that we have to be careful of too is correlation versus causation. And this is a big thing in data mining. The idea that two things that happen at the same time, that is different than one thing causing another. So there's the disease called polio that's almost been eradicated, but there are a couple countries that think that it's a plot for people to inject people with stuff, and so it's a human frailty type of thing, and so not everybody is getting the polio vaccine, and a lot of places stop because polio has been eradicated so many places. But it was such a transmittable disease and a problem. And they thought that, well, it always happens during summer. So what do we do during summer that we don't do during some other time? And that's have ice cream or swimming. Okay, so swimming causes polio. No, it doesn't. Okay, and having ice cream doesn't. It just so happens polio happened during the summer, and you have more ice cream in the summer than you do in the winter, type of thing. And so correlation is they happen together, causation. So we can look and do mathematics to say correlate. Two things happen at rates, and we can use the math to judge what that rate is. Now, when it's cause, we can't really do that part because the math can't do a cause. Okay, that's the science and understanding your marketing, your finance, your various parts of the world that you have expertise. That's where we have to have the theory to be able to build those. More fire engines are called to a fire, the more damage the fire is likely to do. Well, duh, because if you're calling more fire engines, then it's a bigger fire. If it's a small fire, you're not calling more fire engines. Okay, and so that's really the damage that we're going to do. If there is a causal, difficult to tell the direction, which variable causes one or the other. Okay, there is a correlation between people's mood and physical health. It's not obvious which variable influences the other. Does good mood improve health, or does good health improve people's mood? And you can make the argue both ways. Okay, polio carries for the summer, and those people eat more ice cream, so they declared ice cream is a problem, and so parents said no more ice cream, and ice cream sales plummeted unfairly. Same thing with pools. So experts called 2017 year of data literacy, digital transformation. Um, Mere 13% of data analytics reach completion, 13%. Okay, and of those do, only 8% sent the report completely satisfied. So why are they dismal? Track back to major pitfalls. Wrong questions, bad data, weak buy-in, lack of expertise, of diversity to be able to know what all this. And one of our biggest projects we have, and you're going to find this in management for all of this, is weak stakeholder buy-in. A lot of these things, like doing GIS, the mapping, geographical information systems, they are all very expensive. And being very expensive, sometimes you don't get results for a while. We always try, and as a manager, I always try and say, get results early so that people get excited so you can continue. If you don't get results early, sometimes people say, yeah, no, we're going to kill the budget and we're going to put the budget someplace else. So that money got wasted. So you need to have strong. And so whenever we talk about project management, if for those that if you take any of the project management classes, you always have to have the good executive to sponsor to basically go in and say, nope, we are going to spend money. We believe in this project. It is going to take some time. We are going to do that type of thing. Okay, so some of the common hazards, we start with the wrong questions. Basically, exploratory problems could yield compelling results due to a production strong business case. Okay, is this actionable? Scope of exploratory is too broad. Okay, we need to be kind of more exempt. Establish goal maps directly, creating business value. What are the KPIs? Can we tie those things together? Faulty data, bad data is the most underestimated cause of data. That's why we want to clean up data. We'll talk about that. Spend enough time cleaning. Good guidelines, 80% project timeline is data cleanup because we have to figure out what the data is and missing data and how do we correlate data between two different places because the different places have different scales. Are they fair? What can we do to be able to put those together? Okay, and down at the bottom it says consolidate unstructured data versus structured data. Well, structured data is one that we typically understand, like a database. Okay, you know what the first name, last name, monthly sales, all those. Unstructured data may not have a description. Okay, and so we run into some issues there, structured versus unstructured, and how do you correlate that information? Weak buy-in without stakeholder support commitment, projects can fail. Best ensure process, business alignment along with organization, solid data strategy, and whatnot. All right, so we can kind of zip through some of this. All right, so major issues, mining different types of knowledge, interactive mining knowledge at multiple levels, because it allows users to focus on different patterns, providing and finding based on results, background knowledge. You guys have incredible and looking at a lot of things that you're doing to have a more international perspective than a lot of the kids I worked in universities here. They're a little bit too narrow. You guys have a more wide view focus, which can really help understand that in multiple cultures, multiple languages, all of those types of things. Data mining, query languages, ad hoc mining, being able to present that, the information, handling noisy data or complete noisy. Think of like when you have a fax and you send that, it's taking an image, but sometimes you have speckles, those little random dots. That's noisy data. Okay. Can you use noisy data or can you get rid of it? Well, what happens if that noisy data is there for a reason? Okay, is there a pattern to that noisy data? And when we analyze data, that's one of the things we look for is we say, okay, let's get a pattern so we can understand the equation. We can understand 80% of the variation. So we get a model and we say 80%, 20% of it is unpredictable. But if we look at that extra 20% and say there's a pattern, well, maybe there's a second pattern and we can get a better estimation of what we do. So those are the patterns. What are they in? Efficiency, scalability. How are we going to do that? The cloud, the internal. How are we going to, what is to extract that information, and what are going to be the mechanisms that we're going to have? Are we going to throw this and data mining and whatnot? The idea of are we going to do lots of little chunks all over the place when we talk about big data analytics? Are we doing a parallel where we're doing multiple things at the same time? Are we doing little chunks incremental? So there are a lot of different options there. So there are a bunch of tools out there. This list is not anywhere expansive, but these are some of the ones that are kind of out there, and a lot of them are open source. Tableau, depending that one has various versions. A lot of these have various versions for what you can do. All right, so I'll let you read through the data scientist side. Just basically kind of a long list of what is it that data scientists do. Just I wanted to kind of throw that out, analyze, identify, propose, what are they doing during the day? What are all the various parts that they actually work on? Analytics, procedures, mathematical trends. Okay. So nothing real shocking. It's just interesting to see the full list of all the things that are out there. So typically from an HR, they talk about the job zone comparable, considerable prep needed. So you need background to be able to do this because there is a lot of tools, and a lot of this is the understanding of extra things and knowledge and whatnot. Coordinate, supervise, managing others. Managing others is always a challenge, trying to get the best out of people. I've worked in great organizations. I've worked in difficult organizations. And just kind of give you an idea, these dollars, the wages are a couple years old, 4 or 5 years old. So they're a little bit higher than that now, whatnot. But to give you kind of the idea that, yeah, no, if you become a data scientist and you get in the right place, they are very well paid. Mhm. All right. And then in here, for those, I believe most of you have already taken the statistics class, but we've done kind of an overview of what they are, just kind of go through and we're going to be building on some of these. Again, the Excel that you're going to be using, the statistics, that's going to be a cookbook. So it'll walk you right through every, kind of like a cookbook making a recipe. It'll walk you through every step that you need to do. So you're not going to have to worry about the analysis. And so when we talk about statistics in class, I'm going to show you 1 or 2 formulas just so that you see what a formula is, but we care about the results. We're not going to care about the formulas. We're going to care about how it gets applied and what impact it means. Because like, for example, we care about a normal distribution. Okay, we care about everything because everything is going to be kind of random. There'll be some random errors on either side, but as you get farther out, the likelihood of an error is less. Okay, that's how most statistics are all set up that way. Well, if we have a left skew or a right skew, well, that changes a lot of things. And how can we find that skew? Well, if the mode, median, and mean all equal, well, then that's the bell curve. But if the mean, the median, and the mode, so the mode is the most entries, the median is the center, and the mean is the average. Okay, so how do we look those? So if they're all equal, that means we've got a normal. If they're not, that tells us something different. And in statistics, we have to use different things if we don't have a normal distribution. We either make the data normal. Sometimes we do logarithmic, like earthquakes are, the current one from Russia. Those are all logarithmic scale on the Richter scale. So a 5 is 10 times lower than a 6. Not just a 1, but 10 times. And 6 is 10 times lower than a 7. So a 7 is 100 times bigger than a 5 type of thing for power. So, but they're even numbers because we're able to do a transform on them to make them make sense and get them into a normal distribution. And so I use Geeks for Geeks a bunch. I like that one. I like Tech Target. I like Geeks for Geeks. Those are both good websites to have some good analysis. So when you pull a blank, and we all do, go look at kind of, okay, what's that mean? Yep, okay, we're going to look at those. So differential, inferential statistics. We went over quantitative, qualitative, discrete, continuous, a number of things. There are a whole bunch of them there. Those are all the various tools that we actually need to know. But we need to know kind of what they do and how they're used. So then we let the tool do all the work. And so we just kind of go through each one just as an overview. Okay. Correlation, regression. So just kind of walk through those. One of the Excel exercises is clustering, the idea that when you see dots on a chart, so the first thing we do whenever we're doing data analysis is you throw the data up on the wall and you see, okay, is there a pattern? Can you see a line? Can you see pie charts? Can you see charts together where the dots are clustering into groups? Okay, well, groups mean something. And so, for example, data mining on customers. Well, we have some customers that are high-end customers and we have some customers that are low-end customers. Okay, well, we need to know where those customers are so we can predict them to do the right marketing parts. So how do we kind of do this to the market research pattern recognition is kind of what we're trying to do on those. All right, clustering methods, we partition them up, we have hierarchical, all these different parts, and there are lots of expansive ones that you'll see, density, grid-based, model-based, but for the most part, we use just kind of a standard k-means, and that's it. Okay, but you need to understand there are other ones out there because depending on what field you get into, there may be some frameworks, there may be some constraints that require you to use one of these. And for example, if it's not a normal distribution, maybe the world changes a little bit. Outliers are important because is an outlier a mistake or is an outlier something that's weird that tells you there's something we have to address, a problem or a good thing type of thing? Because it may not be bad, it may be good. So in the chart in the upper right, you'll see kind of looks like time clocks where you have a dot and then a line at top and bottom. The line top and bottom says what's the range for that number. So the number will go anywhere in that range. So, if we did an average or a smoothing curve on that, we would expect the expected background, but instead the data showed something, okay, some new prediction and whatnot. So, okay, how do we address those? So detecting outliers. We use that for spam analysis. We use that for a number of different tools in data mining, the idea of looking for the weird one, okay? And of that, one of the things that we do when we do things like this, and this is something we do in cyber when we're checking for viruses and whatnot, there are only two things. One, you either know it exists, okay, and that's a signature that you download new antivirus and whatnot, and we can recognize it. But if it's something we don't recognize, we can't see it. Okay, and so how do you find a virus that you can't recognize? Well, we know what's normal. And if something happens that's abnormal, then we chase it. Okay, and so that's all there is to cybersecurity. You either know about it, somebody else has found it, you can find the pattern, we have an antivirus to block it. If it's known, if it's unknown, then it's a behavior, and we call it behavioral analysis. We do that with people. We do that. We can no longer do profile because profile is a bad thing to profile somebody. That sounds so bad. But we found that you can't do it on a person, but you can always model the behavior. Bad guys always do the same behaviors, no matter who, what, where, whatever profile they fit. They're always kind of do. So we look at those behaviors. Same thing in cyber. We look at the network behavior, the program behavior, the hard disk behavior, something. And when it's doing something weird, then it may be normal, but it's at least flags for us to be able to look at it. Data entry errors. So what's an outliers? Measurement, experimental, intentional. Well, and a lot of things we do, we put in data sets. When we do things, we test things. So I want errors. I want to know when the program's going to blow up. So I want to test it to make sure that it's going to find the things that go bump in the night. And correspondence analysis, categorical, two-way table to basically say, okay, market research, okay, how do they relate each other, whatnot, to rows and columns. So think of it as a grid. Non-parametric, the idea of how do we do this where they're not numbers? Did we do that where I referred to that Likert, Likert, Likert scale? Okay, how do we make numbers out of things that don't have numbers? Okay. Pattern recognition, voice. I mean, voice are just numbers on a scale. You and I are trained to listen to it, but computers are not. But they've gotten a lot better, and it's always fascinating to how does a computer recognize you even though you have a cold, type of thing. Your voice changes. All right, so let me go through neural networks. Key thing is conditional probability, the idea that everything is independent, so it doesn't care what happened before. Coin toss. I don't care what you did before, the next coin toss is going to be 0.5%. But if I'm going to get four heads in a row, it's only 6% of the time that I have to do coin to coin. Now, if you go to Vegas and you say, hey, it just went three, well, the next one could be equally, it doesn't matter. The first three times that it did heads or black or red, if you're roulette, the next time it could be black or red. It's equal. You've already done the first three. You're just doing the last number. Now, are the odds good? Yeah, I'd probably bet that way. If it did three reds in a row, there's only 6% of the time that it's going to be a fourth. Okay, so I would probably bet the other way. Now, am I going to be accurate? Probably not. And that's why I don't bet that much. All right, you'll see the number, the scale probably be B given A and the formulas, and that's about all the formulas we're going to do. So, okay, nice, simple. All right, so I want to go through. Bayes' theorem is conditional probability, and you're going to hear the term, so read through that one, and don't worry about the formula. It's just basically P of B given A times A divided by B. Okay, that's all it is. Okay, so there's a relationship there, and it wants to see what that is, and so it's mathematical to be able to pull that in. So because we're going to talk about false positives, false negatives, where a test gives you the wrong answer. Okay, how do we get rid of the wrong answers, type of thing. All right, almost done. So the examples. All right, clustering k-means. Okay, so discussion questions. Now, one thing I didn't say earlier on the discussion question that I want to put in is when I give you two discussion questions, okay, there are 50 people in this class, okay? There are not 50 unique answers, okay? And I know that, okay? And so we kind of expect that. So what I want you to do when I give you questions, I want you to answer one. So, anytime you do a discussion questions, a traditional would say, post an answer, post a response, and then answer somebody else's. Okay, my class, we're a little bit different. Every question, you need to put something in. I don't care. One of those questions, and you choose which one, is a post. One of those questions is a response. If we have three questions, it'll be a post and two responses. Okay, and a response is not a I agree. There has to be some. I actually look at everybody's answers. When I grade your discussion score at the end, I look for, I'm not looking for huge thesis or whatnot. The 100 words, the normal paragraph is fine. And a response can be 2 or 3 sentences to add a point. I look at everyone, and if you answer every question, you get all 10 points. Okay. If you just say I agree, you don't get question, and if you didn't do enough of an answer, you may get half a point for that question. But so it's a ratio. You will get all the points if you answer all the questions. So keep in mind, you don't have to do a response and or a post and a response. You post on one, and everybody else will respond to you, and then on the other question, you respond to somebody else's post. So that way, there's not 50 tried unique posts because most of these discussion questions will have 5, 6, 7 key points. How do you have that times 50? Okay, that makes no sense. Okay, so that's why at least I'm able to cut it down a little bit. But these are issues that you need to find and to think about and discuss because you will get hit on the midterm, the final. These build into some of your projects and those types of things. So that's what we have for Monday morning, the beginning of your week. Thank you for sticking around, and That's you've got a flavor. This is kind of what it is. So again, you'll see more slides. You guys can choose when you want to do your personal at the beginning of week 2 through week 15. I will be asking who wants to give a presentation. And the first one is the hardest, and then you'll see it's nothing. It's nothing to get to about. And you don't have to worry about having the right answer. You have to have the answer that you think is correct, and you get full credit even if I disagree with you. Right. And so there's no issue there. It's all about getting the discussion started. Because there are going to be things that you're going to think about. I'm going to probably add to them. And you may have things that I haven't thought about. And that's terrific. Okay. And that's part of building on this as opposed to just reading a bunch of slides. I really want you to be interactive and get something out of this as we build. Again, if there are comments, great. Always put them in chat. Bring them in. If there are things that you want to address, I can stick around after class. I stick around before. I typically don't turn off the Zoom. If you want to stay off Zoom, I'll turn off the recording so that you can have a discussion and not have it recorded for everybody to listen. For a respect of privacy, and that's kind of where we are. So if you have any questions, great. If not, then go take a bio break and go get ready for your next event, whatever it may be. Thank you very much for joining. I'll go ahead and turn off the recording.